Let me open with a friendly shock. Most Western Aries were born when the sun wasn't anywhere near the Aries constellation. That's not a printing mistake, it's how the system works. Western horoscopes use a tropical zodiac that locks the start of Aries to the spring equinox, a seasonal marker, while the visible star pictures have been sliding for centuries because Earth's axis slowly wobbles. That slow wobble precession of the equinoxes was recognized in antiquity and is still measured today. In plain language, our seasonal wheel stays put, the constellations drift behind it. That single idea explains a lifetime of mixed messages about your sign. Take a breath and imagine the night sky like a grand clock. The tropical versus sidereal zodiac debate is really a question about which hand of the clock you want to read. The tropical hand points to the seasons, equinoxes and solstices that shape planting, festivals, and the rhythm of cities. The sidereal hand points to the fixed stars, the actual constellations along the sun's path. Both are real frames, they simply answer different needs. Western astrology kept the seasonal frame. Stargazers, and some traditions like many schools of Indian astrology, keep their eyes on the fixed star frame. Once you know there are two maps, the confusion begins to clear. Now, the part of the internet that loves chaos will shout, "There's a 13th sign, Ophiuchus." This pops up like clockwork. Here's the calm version. Astronomers note that the sun's yearly path actually passes through 13 constellations. Ancient calendar makers standardized 12 equal signs for practical reasons. That tidy decision doesn't mean astronomers or space agencies secretly changed the chart last week. NASA has had to say this many times. Fact checkers have too. Your sign didn't change because a social post went viral. The tropical zodiac does not depend on star boundaries. It's tied to the equinox. When headlines about Ophiuchus start trending again, you'll know why, and you can smile and go back to reading the sky like an adult. Let's keep this conversational. Picture us on a terrace at dusk. I point to the western horizon where the last color fades, and I tell you a small story about Hipparchus, one of the careful watchers of old. By comparing records of when the equinox happened against star positions, he realized something subtle. The equinox point isn't fixed among the stars. It moves slowly, steadily, about a degree every 70-something years. Over many centuries, that shift is huge. It's why people talk about the age of Aries, age of Pisces, and so on. You don't have to memorize any numbers. Just hold this. The seasonal framework is anchored to Earth-Sun geometry, not to constellations. That's the heart of the precession story and the root of the modern mismatch. So why did cultures keep both maps, the seasonal wheel and the star pictures? Because each map solves a different problem. The seasonal wheel is unbeatable for civil life. Courts, markets, and fields all benefit from fixed quarter points. The star map is unbeatable for navigation, ritual hours, and memory. Sailors ride by the rising of certain stars. Priests count the night with star groups. Storytellers pin myths to the sky so that lessons don't fade. A farmer doesn't need a personality blurb under Leo. She needs to know when the rains turn, when to prune, and when the flood arrives. The city magistrate needs to know which weeks are fair for contracts and which are holy days. The physician wants a shared schedule for treatments and fasting. That's why both frames persisted. One keeps time for the seasons, the other keeps time with the stars. Here's a quick, practical translation. When an astrologer says 0 Aries, in the tropical system they mean the vernal equinox, full stop. When an astronomer says Aries, they probably mean the constellation, 2 different labels, 2 different uses. If your favorite astrologer prefers a sidereal zodiac, they're aligning their 12 signs with star positions and measuring precession with an offset, Ayanasha. If your favorite astrologer uses a tropical zodiac, they're anchoring the signs to Earth's seasonal cycle. No one forgot the stars, they're just using different rulers for different jobs. The internet loves to turn this into a cage match. The ancients were more relaxed. They were busy building canals, timing festivals, and treating fevers. Now, about that Ophiuchus panic. When people claim a space agency added a sign, what actually happened is that an education page or a journalist reminded readers that the sun's path crosses 13 constellations and that Babylonian calendar makers standardized 12 for symmetry with months. Reporters amplify it, social feeds run hot, then scientists sigh and repeat. Astronomy is mapping the sky. Astrology is a cultural system. The tropical zodiac never depended on constellation boundaries. You can enjoy horoscopes as stories or symbolic tools without forcing them to match the latest IAU constellation lines. That's like insisting a city's bus routes must overlay exactly with the old footpaths, different maps, different purposes. You'll hear me say terms like precession of the equinoxes, tropical zodiac, and sidereal zodiac, but I'll always pull them back to images you can feel. Think of a spinning top on a table. As it slows a little, the top wobbles, the pointer sweeps a slow circle. That's Earth's axis over long time. Or think of a calendar hung in your kitchen. The equinox always lands in March. Your spring festival doesn't jump from month to month because constellations shifted a bit behind the Sunday. That's the tropical frame. Meanwhile, the star pictures Aries, Taurus, Gemini, all the way to Pisces are like old street names that help you find your way at night. They carry stories about rescue and sacrifice, Aries, kidnapping and kingship, Taurus, loyalty beyond death, Gemini, and earned mastery, Leo. We'll walk through those stories, but with their original jobs restored. Civic ethics, navigation, agricultural planning, medical timing, and ritual. One more gentle clarification before we move on in the next section. You might hear folks argue that one zodiac is the real one. In history, real usually means the one that fits our purpose. Priests counting night hours in Egypt used star groups called decans. Mesopotamian scribes built tables of heliacal risings for state planning. Greek mathematicians framed a 12-sign system and then argued about techniques. Medieval scholars allowed parts that matched Christian doctrines and policed parts that didn't. In short, many communities made choices. That's why you and I can talk across cultures. A zodiac is not a monolith, it's a shared tool chest. In this series, we'll keep the astronomy honest, precession, equinoxes, the sun's ecliptic path, and we'll let the myths and methods breathe in their original rooms. Before we pause, let's lock in 3 takeaways you can use right away. First, your Western sign didn't change last Thursday. Those headlines recycle old misunderstandings about constellations and the tropical calendar. Second, precession is real physics. The sun and moon tug on Earth's equatorial bulge, and over many centuries, that shifts where seasonal points land among the stars. Third, tropical versus sidereal isn't good versus bad. It's seasons versus stars. Ask which job you're trying to do, then pick the right ruler. Next up, we'll walk back to the earliest working manuals and river calendars, the clay tablet world, where the zodiac earned its keep long before personality lists. The language will stay warm and human, the facts will stay tight, and you'll start to hear why the night sky became the world's oldest library and planner all at once. Before the 12, reed pens, river calendars, and MUL. A-pin picture, a river plain breathing in slow seasons. Reeds hiss in the wind, oxen lean into the plough, and on a courtyard roof a scribe squints at the faintest spark before dawn. He isn't searching for a lucky day to marry or a line about personality. He's catching a first appearance heliacal rising when a star slips back into view after weeks lost in the sun's glare. That single sighting will ripple through fields, warehouses, and courtrooms. It will set irrigation gates, tax visits, and temple days humming in time. This is where the zodiac earns its keep. Long before polished horoscopes, it is a scheduling language. In Mesopotamia, the sky is a public notice board, and mul, Apin, is the chalk. Think of MUL, Apin, as a compact library carved in clay, lists of star groups, when they rise and set, how long days stretch in each season, which wines accompany, which appearances, and how to stitch extra months into a lunar year so barley and moonlight don't drift apart. It isn't a manual for personality. It is a farmer's almanac, a harbour timetable, and a cabinet memo one after another, line by careful line. The scribes who copied these tablets used 3 lanes in the sky, named for high, middle, and low paths, an old way to sort constellations as they wheel overhead. The method sounds poetic. It is actually practical. If you know whether a star belongs to the northern, equatorial, or southern belt, you can predict not only when it returns, but how high it will climb and where it will guide a traveler on the river at night. The sky becomes a map you can carry in your head, the kind that lets you push a barge after sunset without scraping a sandbank. Now listen for the rhythm that structures everything. First, visibility. A star's pre-dawn return signals a new phase in the yearly cycle: sowing, pruning, harvesting, counting. The palace cares because grain shipments depend on honest calendars. The temple cares because festivals must meet their heavens on time. The village cares because hunger doesn't forgive sloppy timing. In this world, astronomy is civil engineering. Watching the east is as important as measuring a canal. Of course, there are omen lists, long sequences that read like weather notes with royal anxiety. They say things like, when a star rises out of season, expect trouble in a specific quarter. To modern ears, that sounds like prediction. To ancient administrators, it's a warning flag. If a signal arrives off schedule, something in the machinery has slipped. The response isn't fatalism, it's action. Double-check the canals, adjust stores, warn the border posts. By folding such notes into mul. Apin's practical tables, the scribes tuned the palace to the sky's pulse. This habit tie action to recurring star events travels remarkably well. Fast forward centuries, and you'll see the same logic under new architecture. City squares in Europe carry circular calendars in stone. Fairs, court terms, and sewing windows cluster around sky markers everyone can recognize. The familiar ring of zodiac figures flanked by the labors of the months is not a decoration fad. It's a memory aid for a town that must live together, plow here, prune there, settle accounts here, bring grapes there. When you see a mason place Libra by scales, you're looking at market law. When Leo sits under blazing sun, that's not a personality flex. It's the season of heat and harvest risk being managed by a familiar emblem. Back on the river plains, another challenge had to be handled with regularity: the mismatch between lunar months and the solar year. 12 lunations fall short, the seasons slide, the barley ripens at the wrong time. The answer is intercalation, adding a 13th month when needed. MUL, APIN, explains how to see the drift and when to fix it. This is the quiet genius of the tablets. They don't only name stars, they teach governors how to keep a city and a countryside in the same season. Every intercalary decision is a promise. We will bring moon and bread back into line. You can also feel the beginnings of something that later readers will mistake as only myth. Constellations are given titles that carry memory: the heavenly bull, the great twins, the scales, long before Latin names are standard. Stories cling to these shapes, but the stories start as labels in a working system. When the bull's bright red eye climbs, we would call it Aldebaran. It's not merely a symbol, it's a beacon for timing. When the scales stand at the western edge of the sun's path, that's harvest weighed and contracts measured. The poetry grows from the practice, not the other way around. Now fold one more idea into your pocket. The royal stars, 4 bright markers stationed roughly at the quarters of the sky. They anchor seasonal thinking and navigation at once. Later, civilizations will crown them with titles and moral weight. Here, their value is that you can find them reliably, and they announce turning points. If you've ever used the Big Dipper to jump to Polaris, you already know the trick. Star hopping, MUL. Apin trains a culture to do it across the ecliptic, months at a time. Let's keep this human. Picture a team of canal workers who know a certain star's rising means the river will change its temper. They move tools to higher ground before the officials even issue the order. Picture a widow in a market who recognizes that a festival tied to a star cluster is approaching. She bakes early and saves flour. Picture a magistrate who schedules a court session in a window traditionally tied to fairly measured contracts. None of these people need an ephemeris on parchment. They need customs tied to sky regularities that everyone can spot. That is the social power of early star law. It aligns strangers who share nothing else. This is also where the later distinction between tropical and sidereal thinking is born without anyone naming it. On one hand, communities grow attached to fixed quarter points, the 2 solstices, the 2 equinoxes, because those turn the year like hinges. On the other hand, the constellations keep their storytelling utility and their navigational use. Over long centuries, the equinoxes will slide along the constellations because of precession, but the seasonal hinges remain perfect for civic life. You can now see why a later culture would standardize the signs as 12 equal segments beginning at the equinox. The wheel is a calendar. The star pictures are a night map. They can shake hands without fusing. Before we leave the courtyard, let's visit the scribe's reed box. Next to the stylus lies a tablet that pairs body zones with the sky head at Aries, feet at Pisces. It's the seed of Melathesia, a diagram that physicians across centuries will use to time procedures and choose gentler days. You don't have to accept the medicine to feel the practicality. In a world without anesthetics, even a shared belief that we cut less under this sign can standardize care, reduce panic, and keep a town moving. The diagram survives because it's a rule of thumb pinned to a clock everyone can read. Now the transition to later ages becomes easy to hear. A Greek mathematician will formalize techniques and argue about houses and lots. A Roman patron will stamp constellations on coins to promise cosmic favor. A bishop will scold hard determinism but allow celestial weather on bodies and moods. An Andalusian translator will carry tables across language borders. And under all that, the Mesopotamian habit remains. Tie your actions to recurring sky markers so people can act together. Pause with that. The earliest zodiac is not a horoscope column, it's a city's metronome. When a faint star pierces the horizon mist and a scribe scratches its sign on clay, he isn't writing your fate, he's resetting the shared clock. Egypt's night clock. Decans, dendera, and soul voyages. Imagine lying on a cool limestone floor while the night ceiling above you begins to glow not with paint, but with memory. Egypt didn't measure the hours by gears, it measured them by stars. Along the eastern horizon, small star groups rose one after another, each taking its turn as a bead on a long celestial rosary. Priests called these groups the decans. Every 10 nights or so, a new decan announced itself just before dawn, and with that whisper the keepers of time knew which hour the temple had entered. The sky wasn't just pretty, it was a working clock that could be read by anyone trained to face the right part of the horizon and wait for the right shimmer. Hold that picture while we walk, slowly, into a temple at Dendera. The air is scented with resin. Scribes have traced a circular zodiac on the ceiling, but the ring is only the doorway. Around it, panels describe night as a journey through stations. Boats carry deities across darkness. Goddesses stretch like protective canopies as the hours slide past beneath them. The decans are the hour posts along this route. When a priest says the ritual will begin in the 3rd hour of the night, he isn't guessing. He is matching words and incense to a rising star group that keeps the temple's schedule honest. The beauty of this system is how it braids practicality with meaning. A decan rising marks an hour, but it also cues a scene in the cosmic drama Egyptians told about the sun's nightly passage. As the sun sinks, it enters the duat, the underworld road where a royal boat battles through shadowed regions and returns at dawn. The decans are the signs you pass along that road. Here a guardian, there a gate, then a bend in the river, and finally the bright portal where day pours back into the world. When the chant says, "Now the bouquet turns," a decan is lifting its head in the east to underline the line. Timekeeping and myth share the same breath. The tools match the idea. In one corner, a water clock drips into a marked bowl. In another, an inscribed list pairs decans with hours and deities. You can picture a junior priest, eyelids heavy, counting the thin stream of water as insurance, while his elder watches the horizon. The water clock provides steady ticks. The sky provides the authority. On feast nights, the temple staff don't only tell time, they join it. Processions move when the decan says move. Lamps are lifted when the hour says lift. The calendar becomes choreography, and the choreography becomes theology. This way of living with the sky shaped ordinary routines as well. Farmers learned the personality of the year not from slogans but from returns of light. The most famous return was the first flashing of Sirius before sunrise after weeks hidden near the Sunday. That appearance came near the season when the Nile would rise. Families listened for it the way a town today listens, for the first thunder of monsoon. Clothes were mended, granaries checked, tools prepared. A single star's reappearance braided weather, faith, and logistics into one crisp signal. Inside the sanctuaries, artists arranged the heavens as architecture. The ceiling at Dendera is not a flat diagram. It's a roof that holds up stories and schedules at once. 12 signs ring the middle because Egypt knew the sun's path through the constellations, especially once Greek star lore entered the scene. But the quieter truth is in the supporting bands, 36 decans, the hours of night, the goddesses who guard each portion, the instructions for a soul to pass safely. The eye can wander the panels like a traveler moves through rooms, and each room keeps a piece of time. There's a human gentleness to this, and it shows in how grief was handled. Funerary texts describe the soul's night crossing as a sequence of meetings and recognitions. The lists of names, the passwords, the hymns, at their passes, the right hour, these are not abstract puzzles. They are companions for a family that refuses to send someone into the dark alone. The decans anchor that kindness. If the household knows which star will rise at the third hour, the prayer for the third hour becomes a steady step on a staircase. The heavens are a lantern, not a test. By the time scholars and craftsmen in Alexandria were writing in Greek about signs and planets, this Egyptian habit of slicing the night into reliable pieces met a new love of geometry. The 12 signs were divided into 36 faces, each 10 degrees wide, the echo of the decans entering a different language. What began as a horizon watch becomes a way to refine a birth chart, assign images to degrees, and time cures and ceremonies with finer granularity. You can almost hear the workshop chatter. Work under the second face of the ram, a phrase that blends a temple priest's memory with a mathematician's compass. Even when stone seems silent, alignment speaks. Temples across the Nile country point towards sunrise on special days. Corridors act as sightlines to watch light slide down a wall and kiss a statue at the right moment. Those alignments aren't accidents. They treat time as something you can walk into. Imagine standing in a dark hall as the first bar of sunrise reaches your face exactly when the decan announced the hour and the hymn of that hour begins. Your body learns the calendar without reading a word. The logic of the decans also bled into medicine and craft. If night hours are arranged like stations, you can assign mixtures, perfumes, and prayers to those stations. A healer times a remedy to the third of the night, because that hour belongs to a certain decan with a certain nature. A maker of images chooses a moment because the sun now stands in a sign and a particular decan, two interlocking dials that promise the result will hold. We don't have to judge outcomes to recognize the neatness of the method, match a human need to a repeating slice of sky time so actions feel nested in a larger order. And because order loves company, the decans found their way into public life just as surely as they governed ritual. Towns learned to hang festivals on reliable markers so the crowds and markets could meet at the right scale. Musicians knew which night watches belonged to which hymns. Boat captains knew how far to push in the second hour before dawn without risking a shoal. Even people who never read a scroll could glance up, see a familiar star rise ahead of the sun, and say, "We are in that part of the night," the way you and I glance at a streetlight and say, "It's late." If you listen closely, you can hear how all this changes the meaning of a sign like Leo or Libra when it finally arrives on the ceiling. Leo isn't just a symbol of strength, it sits in the heat of late summer, when labor must be paced and stored grain must be guarded. Libra isn't only a pretty set of scales, it stands near the place where day and night balance, the time when markets settle accounts and the law expects fair measures. Egypt's star art teaches the moral through the calendar, not the other way around. The sign is a seasonal tool first, a story shorthand second. Let's end this evening still on the floor of that temple, eyes adjusting to starlight, ears catching a quiet procession somewhere beyond the columns. A priest raises a hand, and on cue the lamps tilt, the hymn for the hour rises. A small child watches an elder trace a star path with a fingertip, as if connecting dots on the skin of the sky. No one talks about destiny. They talk about timing. They talk about bringing a city, a river, and a household into agreement with the heavens' returning steps. Soon, we will carry this habit forward into the workshops of Alexandria, where signs, houses, and aspects become a toolkit that scholars still argue about. For now, keep the Egyptian lesson close. Time can be watched, sung, and walked. When a star lifts its head above the horizon and a boat begins to move inside a dark hallway of stone, the world keeps the hour together. Hellenistic Alexandria, from star lists to birth charts. Picture the shoreline of a city that speaks in many tongues. Ships unload papyrus, spices, bronze instruments with sliding sights, and stories carried in sailors' pockets. In this city, Alexandria, the sky stops being only a calendar and becomes a language you can calculate. You can feel the change in the air. Scribes who once kept lists of rising stars now argue about how to measure an angle between the moon and Venus, whether a sign begins at a boundary or at a feeling, and which slice of the sky belongs to a person at birth. A temple hour has become a blueprint for a chart. Walk with me into a small workshop off a busy street. On a low table sits a wax tablet, a pair of dividers, and a strand of cord for quick arcs. A client's birth date, hour, and place are scratched beside a circle. The circle will be divided into 12 compartments, houses that stand for arenas of life, identity and body, earnings and skills, siblings and short journeys, family and foundations, creativity and children, illness and service, partnership and contracts, crises and debts, journeys and law, authority and reputation, friends and benefactors, and the hidden places where endings and beginnings mingle. These houses get their flavor not from myth alone, but from the old civic calendar. Where do we start? Where do we measure? What follows what? The chart is a city map of a life. Now the artisan lays a band of 12 signs around the circle, each a 30-degree stretch of the ecliptic. In earlier centuries, signs were a seasonal clock and constellations a night map. Here the signs are also an alphabet. Each sign carries qualities hot or cold, moist or dry, cardinal or fixed or mutable that help a reader speak in clean phrases. Aries kicks off and initiates, Taurus holds and grows, Gemini connects and distributes, Cancer shelters, Leo radiates, Virgo sifts, Libra measures, Scorpio probes, Sagittarius aims, Capricorn structures, Aquarius reforms, Pisces releases. The poet's images are intact, but the technician's grid has arrived. Listen for a new word that changes the feel of the room. Aspect. Imagine threads stretched between two planets like taut strings on a lyre. When the strings meet at certain angles, conjunction, sextile, square, trine, opposition, the room hums differently. Some angles are soft, some are tense, some are grand beams that carry action across a chart. People in Alexandria argue about whether a sign-based relationship is enough or whether you must measure exact degrees. They test, teach, and write. The practical people make lists of outcomes. The philosophers try to say why certain angles speak louder than others. Either way, the craft moves from noticing to composing. Another tool sits beside the protractor, sect. In this system, day births and night births have different guardians. If you were born under the sun's watch, one set of planets tends to help you more. If you were born in the night, another set carries the lantern. This simple sort, day versus night, does real work. It explains why two people with similar charts can live the same themes with different ease. It's not destiny as a trap, it's weather. A sailor accepts that a north wind favors one route and slows another. A chart reader in Alexandria just names the wind. You'll hear one more term pass from hand to hand in this room like a cherished coin. Lots. A lot is a point computed from distances between lights and planets, most famously, the lot of fortune. It's not a star, it's a place derived from relationships, a way to plant a flag in the circle that says, fortune tends to roll toward here. The math is simple, but the idea is generous. Life hangs not only on where bodies are placed, but on the prebaution, relations between them. Fortune is relational. So are courage, truth, and desire, all computed by their own lots. Once a culture learns to think this way, charts become poems of relationship rather than inventories of objects. This is also where birth stories step into the circle. Earlier calendars spoke to communities, harvests, festivals, courts. Alexandria builds a grammar for the individual without losing the city. Houses still echo social roles, signs still mirror seasons, but a person stands at the center as the measure is taken. Precise angles, timed rising signs, and planetary speeds all appear on a single wheel. You can almost hear the applause from the mathematicians next door. They love something you can draw, teach, and test. On the shelf beside the work table sit handbooks. One tries to sound like a philosopher, making the case that the heavens influence earthly mixtures, bodies, airs, and temperaments without chaining the will. Another is the notebook of a working reader, packed with examples. In this year, with this configuration, such and such happened to a merchant's ships. A third book blends Greek technique with older stories and newer observations from far away. You can feel the city's ports in those pages. Lists of decans from Egypt, star tables from older lands, planets named in the ways of two languages at once. This is the world's first big synthesis on paper and wax. What does a session sound like? The reader begins with sect, because the hour of birth splits the room into day or night. Then come the lights, where the sun and moon stand and what they are doing. Next, the ascendant, the sign rising in the east at the moment of birth, because it sets the tone for the first house and, in many methods, for the rest of the houses by whole sign counting. Planets are assessed by dignity and condition. Is this one in a sign it handles well, or is it a guest at someone else's table? Is it visible, swift, stationing? The questions pile up gently, in a sequence anyone in the shop could recite. There is art in the order. Begin with the basics you can defend. Add colors only when the drawing holds. When timing enters, the circle breathes. One method walks the chart in segments, giving certain years to certain signs or planets, like handing the keys of a theater to different directors in turn. Another method watches transits current sky positions meeting the natal positions, the way a city watches market wagons rumble back to familiar streets. The promise isn't omniscience. The promise is rhythm. Expect busy years when this planet runs the show. Expect cool seasons when that angle keeps recurring. The client leaves not with a sentence, but with a calendar. Notice something important about how Alexandria handles fate. The philosophically minded say the heavens incline bodies and moods the way weather inclines crops without touching the soul's choice. A harsh angle in a chart might speak of a tendency toward rash decisions. The teaching is to build fences where you are likely to leap. A supportive angle might speak of doors that open easily. The teaching is to walk through them with grace. The craft here is not fortune-telling as final decree. It is a mirror that says, "These are your strong winds and your shoals." That tone allows physicians to time treatments, merchants to manage risk, and parents to support a child's temperament without stamping them with doom. The room also carries a quieter inheritance, the Egyptian deacons becoming faces, 10-degree subsets of each sign that flavor, interpretation, and timing. A reader might say, the second 10 of the lion favors careful craftsmanship, and what sounds like metaphor is, in fact, a memory of priests counting night hours by star groups. The old night clock beats inside the new chart. From a distance, you might think this is all theory. Up close, it is paperwork. Clients come for ordinary questions: marriage, travel, health, reputation, business, because the city is busy and choices have costs. Charts accompany letters. Parents keep copies. A ship captain keeps one in a leather roll like a charm. You can sense why authorities in later centuries alternately tolerate and scold the craft. It is useful, popular, and resilient. It adapts to new physics without giving up its human purpose, to think about time with a little more kindness and foresight. Let's end today with a small, practical picture. A midwife in a crowded quarter calls out the moment a child is born. A neighbor leans from a window and notes which sign is lifting. The father runs to a reader with the hour. The reader sketches the wheel, smiles at the bright condition of the moon for a night birth, and says, softly, "Raise this one near music and honest work." Nothing in that moment chains the child. It simply gives the family a vocabulary for attention. In a city where ships from 3 continents jam one harbor, that kind of shared language is gold. You can feel the shift that Alexandria brought, from star lists and temple hours to a portable system that any household can carry. Houses, lots, aspects, sect, faces. Each tool is a polite way to talk about life that keeps a shoulder against the door of chaos. Next, we'll follow these notebooks as they travel translated, argued over, spliced with law and theology until they show up in cathedral floors and physicians' almanacs, and the sky's grammar becomes Europe's public time again in a fresh dialect. Translation highways, Baghdad to Toledo to the schools. Picture a long table under lamplight in a city of copyists. Voices switch between Greek, Syriac, and Arabic as a scribe reads a sentence from a worn scroll and another writes it again in a fresh tongue. This is how star knowledge moves in the early centuries of the Islamic world, line by line, breath by breath, until a library that once lived along the Aegean begins to breathe again in Baghdad. Call that room a workshop rather than a museum. Translators there don't just preserve, they compare versions, fix numbers, and append notes from their own sky. Physicians ask for texts on humors and timing. Court officials ask for tables that help plan canals and taxes. Navigators ask for lunar data that keeps ships honest. The star law that entered through ports and old monasteries now sits beside new observations from desert observatories. A reader in this city can pick up a Greek manual and, in the margin, find a correction taken from last year's eclipse. That mix, inherit, observe, annotate, turns the past into something usable. In the same neighborhood, philosophers begin to give the heavens a polite place in the story of how nature works. They argue that the sky influences bodies and weather the way a warm wind softens wax without commanding the soul. With that move, a physician can time a bleeding, a farmer can group tasks by lunar phases, and a judge can set fair market days near equinoxes, all while keeping choice intact. It's a careful middle lane. It allows starcraft to serve medicine, agriculture, and civics, and it keeps courtroom decisions out of the hands of fearmongers who claim that the stars made me do it. Another thread grows in the same soil: manuals of images and hours. Imagine a book that lists metals, stones, herbs, and sky positions, and then teaches how to marry them at the right moment. So a made object carries a desired quality, courage, protection, clarity. The instructions read like a chef's card crossed with a clock. Choose a metal fit for a planet, engrave an image during a planetary hour, burn a resin whose scent agrees with that star, avoid contaminating signs. Whether a reader believes in the result or not, the recipe reveals how high and low arts interlock. Astronomy sets the schedule. Craft supplies the form. Prayer provides the frame. It's a city's way of linking intention to time. Tables multiply. New star catalogues refine longitudes and latitudes of key stars. Almanacs list where the planets will be months from now, so that a caravan can leave on a safer wind or a ritual can meet its sign. Observatories are set on hilltops. Instruments improve. Students learn to sight a star at the same height as a mast across a measured baseline. The method is plain: measure, record, compare, correct. In this environment, the Zodiac man reappears in medical pages as more than an emblem. He becomes a timetable for interventions and fasts, a shared schedule for practitioners and patients who might otherwise guess. Follow the routes west and the scene changes again. Ports in Sicily, copy rooms in southern Italy, and scriptoria in Spain begin to hum with another kind of teamwork. A reader of Arabic whispers a line in the local tongue, a Latinist writes it, then recasts it in a grammar fit for universities that are just finding their legs. The cargo is varied: sky, tables, manuals on planetary hours, bits of natural philosophy, sections of older poetry that carry constellation myths, and seasonal tips. Among the packets are also instructions on images carefully labeled as craft, not worship, because artisans will always ask for timing and recipes if you let them. Enter the royal scriptoria and the university square. A king with a taste for books commissions star tables for sailors and tacksmen. A scholar in Paris teaches logic by morning and, in the afternoon, writes a tract that sorts celestial influence into two bins: what belongs to nature and what overreaches. In that tract, you will find a useful boundary. Influences that touch tides, weather, humors, and general moods are considered part of created order. Claims that predict free acts, guarantee sin, or assign blame to planets are pushed out. The result isn't a ban, it's a curfew. It keeps the practical parts, medicine, weather, calendars, under the city's wing, and it warns off fatalism. This is where the craft takes on a new tone in Europe. Universities bless the math and the meteorology. They allow physicians to consult lunar phases. They tolerate general forecasts that help ports and farms. What they resist are specific decrees about kings dying on Tuesday because Mars is cross. The good readers adapt. They write about temperament and habit, about seasons of life and probable winds in particular years. They tie their lines to observation and custom. When a bishop complains, they point to charted eclipses and to ships that reached harbor on time. Slowly, the respectable parts of the sky's language secure their seat at the long table of the liberal arts. Workshops in metal and ink keep their own pace. Goldsmiths learn to engrave images during hours linked to the planet. A client seeks to honor Saturn for endurance, Venus for harmony, Mercury for skilled hands. Physicians carry small lists of herbs that old manuals pair with certain stars. Even skeptics admit the lists keep the pharmacy organized. A mason sketches a church floor with a ring of signs and the labors of the months, so farmers and clerks alike can walk over time and see their duties written in stone. The zodiac here is not a private oracle, it's the city calendar and a tone setter for work. The quieter miracle is how translation changes the craft itself. Each language swap forces a choice. When a Greek term for a planetary face doesn't quite fit Latin ears, a translator explains it with a longer phrase and, in doing so, shifts the way students think about it. When an Arabic table lists a star by a name unknown in the local tongue, a gloss is added that links it to an older Latin title or to a bright red eye in a known constellation. Margins grow fat with these links. The next generation reads the glosses as if they were original. Out of this gentle drift, an agreed-upon vocabulary forms the seed of a canon. You can watch the social role mature in small scenes. A physician in Bologna flips to an almanac margin to find a quiet week for a nervous patient's procedure, and the patient sleeps easier. A notary in Lyon arranges a fair near an equinox week marked with scales and writes a preface about balance in measure. A ship's pilot in Lisbon keeps a page of star risings tucked into a box with a compass and a rosary. None of these people think the sky will force their hand. They treat the heavens as weather and calendar, then go about their work with a steadier pulse. Skepticism is part of the story, too. City councils issue warnings about fortune tellers who peddle dread. Scholars write reminders that the will is free and that signs are signs, not chains. The better readers answer by being modest and precise. These years tend to bring noise. Prepare. These months favor study and steady labor. Use them. They sound like seasoned farmers giving weather advice, not prophets courting an audience. That tone keeps the conversation going when fashions swing. By late medieval years, another fusion shows up in libraries, manuals that gather planet hours, star images, and lists of herbs and stones into handbooks for artisans and scholars alike. They travel widely because they answer two simple needs. People want to work in time with something larger than themselves, and they like recipes. The old Egyptian habit of matching an hour to a star, the Mesopotamian habit of using risings as signals, and the Alexandrian habit of a portable chart all live inside those pages. A goldsmith sees only his bench and the hour. A scholar sees the lineage. Both feel accompanied. Step back and look at the map we just walked. Knowledge crossed languages and faiths without losing its backbone. Measure the sky, respect the seasons, keep the civic clock, and treat influence as weather, not prison. Along the way, stories shifted, terms changed, and some practices were trimmed to fit new rooms. Yet the core stayed useful. Sailors still needed tables, doctors still needed schedules, judges still liked to hang fairness on a week that felt balanced. When people say the zodiac survived by fashion, they miss the stronger reason. It kept doing jobs that cities consider essential. So when you picture the zodiac in the medieval mind, don't see only starry ceilings and painted saints. See schoolrooms where angles are taught beside grammar. See workshops where planetary hours are chalked above doors with the day's work list. See university debates that carve space for weather and forbid despair. The road from Baghdad to Toledo to Paris did more than preserve Greek pages. It taught Europe to time itself again, this time with a clock that could fit in a book and a conscience that could live with it. Justice in stone, zodiacs on floors, portals, and public time. Imagine walking into a cool nave on a market morning. The doors swing inward, the noise of bargaining fades, and there under your feet is a ring of the year laid in marble. Aries near the spring fairs, Taurus with vines beginning to wake, Leo crouched in the heat, Libra holding its scales when grain and debts are weighed. No speeches, no manuals. Just stone that everyone can read. Those floors and portals weren't decoration first, they were instruction. A town needed a calendar people could trust without a book, so the city turned time into pictures. Each sign shares space with the labors of the months, ploughing, pruning, shearing, pressing. A mason might carve Aquarius beside a figure lugging water, not for poetry alone, but because winter tasks draw families to wells and baths and hearths. In a world where many can't read letters, they can read that circle. When the sunbeam slides across a certain panel by late morning, everyone knows how the day should feel and what jobs suit it. Step over to a side portal and you'll see the same principle at work in another key. The reliefs teach law without a lecture. Harvest. Scenes sit near scales, measures, and contracts because a fair price isn't an opinion, it's a practice tied to season. Libra is more than a symbol, it's a civic promise that grain will be weighed without a thumb on the balance. If you've ever carried a basket to a market and watched a seller adjust the weights with care, you've seen an old star concept turn into policy. This is why the Zodiac shows up on coins and civic seals as well. A ruler didn't place the crab or the lion on currency just to look grand. The emblem tied authority to a time of year and a set of duties. A coin that shows Virgo with sheaves tells paymasters and quartermasters what's expected: storage, distribution, fair allotments, as autumn leans in. People who handle grain and wages don't need to debate theory, they need a clock everyone respects. Look up again at a rose window or a vault. Light pours through colored glass that pairs months with tasks. It's not an accident when the equinox sends a stripe across the floor onto a carved scale or a harvest sign. Builders aimed corridors and windows like sighting instruments. On certain mornings, a band of light runs to a zodiac panel and lingers, and the town hears the bell for a special mass or a fair day. You can feel the choreography: sunlight, bells, market wagons, magistrates in their stalls, all moving when the sky and stone agree. This habit reached beyond churches. Synagogue mosaics in some towns also hold zodiac circles, paired with seasons, and sometimes with the image of the sun's chariot. The message is communal rather than sectarian. Time is public, and we share it. Farmers, clerks, fishermen, everyone walks the same ring. When a festival needs to be seen and not just heard, a floor and a ceiling can hold it all year, day after day. There's another layer tucked into these spaces: fixed stars with reputations. A few bright ones, royal by tradition, keep watch near the corners of the year. Craftsmen and healers kept short lists that linked stones and herbs to those stars, not as superstition alone, but as filing systems for memory and timing. A goldsmith might work under a sky hour associated with a particular star when crafting a gift meant to signal honor. A physician might schedule a gentler treatment in a week that custom pairs with balance and recovery. Even skeptics admitted the schedules calmed patients and kept shops organized. The town didn't need to argue about influence, it needed rhythms that reduced panic. If you listen closely, you hear how fairness and timekeeping intertwine. Courts often sat at predictable points in the year. Contracts were renewed when day and night matched as closely as possible. Fairs attached to saint days that clustered around solstices and equinoxes, giving merchants a natural circuit. A trader could travel knowing that after the harvest, there'd be a week when weights and measures were inspected, when scales were checked, when magistrates were most visible. The signs made it obvious: meet me when the scales return, we'll settle accounts then. Bells and mechanical clocks later joined the choir, but the stone kept teaching. A boy learning to sweep a stall could trace the ring with a fingertip, as his master explained when to stock salt, when to turn cheese, when to set aside coin for the tithe. A girl sent to fetch her mother from the square could glance at a panel and know whether the household needed to start on winter stores or bring out tools for olives. The pictures pulled families into alignment without a single written notice. Lawyers and notaries liked this world because it gave them a tone to borrow. A charter might open with a line about order under the balance of the year. A judge announcing a seasonal amnesty would do it when the light and dark sat close to equal, not because the sky forced the decision, but because it taught the city to expect mercy at that hinge. And where did that sense of hinge come from? From how the building was aimed, how light behaved, how the floor's ring met the sun each quarter. Architecture preached the sermon before anyone spoke. You can walk outside and see the same lesson on civic clocks. Some town clocks painted the zodiac around the dial, not to confuse the hour, but to tie the day's beat to the year's breath. Markets, pilgrimages, tax days, these things breathe better when people trust the cadence. The zodiac there isn't mystique, it's signage. This is a town that keeps season honestly, so bring your wares and sleep without fear of sudden decrees. Not every use was lofty. Bakers used the ring to pace yeast in cold months. Shepherds used it to plan shearing. Salt merchants, those careful weathermen of the medieval world, watched the floor and the sky together and decided when to risk a long drying. Even the theatrical guilds timed plays and processions with help from those pictures. When a story featured a king who needs to judge fairly, it wasn't odd to stage it near the week when the scales were celebrated. The audience needed no explanation. The stone had been telling them the theme all year. Think of the ring as the city's gentle referee. It didn't scold, but it reminded. It didn't predict doom, but it suggested good windows for hard tasks and softer windows for rest or reckoning. People accepted that life brings surprises, floods, fires, sudden luck, but the ring offered a base rhythm. When routine and surprise live together, communities keep their balance better. That's what time art is for. And yes, the zodiac carried story with it the entire time. A child staring at the lion learned a lesson about strength that must be earned, because summers are hot and storage takes discipline. A youngster tracing the scorpion's curve learned caution before harvest, when a misstep can waste a year. Stories latch on to seasons because they stick best there. By turning the year into a circle, you could literally step across. The city made ethics into muscle memory. Now take one last slow walk across the nave. Your shoes click over winter months toward the gentler skies of spring. A stray shaft of light slides across the balance in the stone. Somewhere outside, a bell answers. The square begins to swell with stalls checking their weights. A clerk opens a ledger at a page marked with a small drawing of scales. A farmer counts the coins from a fair price and walks home lighter. No one needed to say a word about planets. The pictures and the light did the work. This is the tone we'll carry forward, the sky as a civil art. In the pages and tools ahead, medicine charts, body maps, and those careful arguments about seasons versus constellations, you'll hear the same heartbeat. Keep time together, hang fairness on the year's hinges, and let signs serve the town before they flatter the self. Doctors, bodies, and signs. Melethesia's map. Imagine a small room that smells of rosemary and hot water. A physician's bench is tidy, a brass astrolabe on a hook, a worn almanac tied with ribbon, a wax tablet scratched with times and initials. On the wall hangs a curious figure, a man spread like a starfish, ringed by the 12 signs. Aries sits at his head, Taurus at the throat, Gemini at the shoulders and arms, and so on, down the ribs and belly, thighs and knees, calves and ankles, until Pisces curls around the feet. That picture has a name, Melethesia, and for centuries it taught practitioners when to act boldly and when to be gentle. Let's sit beside that bench and listen the way an anxious patient would. The physician opens the almanac, not to read personality traits, but to check the moon. In the older medical playbook, the moon is the timekeeper of bodies. It swells tides, quickens sap, stirs sleep, speeds or slows recovery. The practitioner looks for the sign the moon is moving through and the phase she wears: slender sickle, swollen bowl, or thin again. If the moon is passing through a sign that rules a body part, the rule of thumb is simple: avoid cutting there. It's basic risk management: never stress a region when the shared calendar says it's touchy. You can picture the conversations. A barber surgeon ties off a bleeding bowl and glances at the wall chart. "Not today for the ankle," he says. "The moon is with Aquarius." A midwife touches a woman's wrist and asks for the day's rising sign. A pharmacist opens a drawer of dried leaves and waits for the right hour to powder them. They aren't hunting omens, they're keeping everyone on the same rhythm. In a world before antiseptics, where infection crouched behind every nick, the value of caution agreed upon and publicly timed wasn't symbolic, it was survival. The system carried more than cuts and stitches. Temperament mattered. Physicians spoke of mixtures warm and cool, moist and dry, and watched for signs that tipped the balance. A young messenger with a quick pulse and bright eyes might be called warm and airy. A farmer with slow speech and thick hands might be called cool and earthy. The words were shortcuts for observation. Who runs hot? Who chills easily? Who needs drying? Who needs softening? Remedies were matched to these mixes: baths, syrups, poultices, gentle fasting, then timed by day and hour, so patients, guilds, and hospitals could coordinate. When everyone agrees that Tuesdays at the second planetary hour are good for a certain tonic, the town learns to show up together. Lunar timing slid into the work with little friction. Old handbooks listed critical days, points in an illness when fevers often break or flare, and paired them with the moon's turns. A sensible practitioner didn't promise miracles on those days, they simply watched more closely. Families learned to expect the swell and the settling. Nurses planned broths and cloths around likely turns. This is medicine as choreography. Align watchfulness with the shared clock so effort lands in the pocket where it has the best chance. Another habit thrived in these rooms: casting a chart for the moment of falling ill, the decumbiture. The idea is, take the time the patient first lay down in distress, map the sky for that moment, and read it like weather. Where are the lights? Which planet carries heat? Where is relief? Even skeptics could see the social value. A chart pinned to a case file kept the household calm. We have named the moment, now we will work the plan. Anxiety always claws at sick rooms. A ritual that sets watches and jobs change linen here, broth there, prayers at this time drops panic into tasks. Herbs and star hours mixed in the pharmacy with the tidy pragmatism of a kitchen. Calendula picked on a morning when the moon was in a moist sign might be set aside for cooling salves. Rosemary cut as a dry sign, rose would be saved for rubs that wake sluggish limbs. Whether the harvest rules had chemical power or not, they did something precious for families. They spread work across the week, prevented hoarding, and created a sense that remedies were prepared with care. People taste intention. You can feel it in a jar labeled in a steady hand. For cough, compounded when the lion rose. Of course, there were limits. Good physicians learned not to shout when a schedule had to bend. A wound that needed stitching now was stitched now. The clock was a guide, not a chain. The better shops wrote that on their door lintels in plainer words: do no harm with timing. That realism kept the craft flexible. When new methods arrived, chemical disinfectants, later antiseptic rules. A schedule that can bend survives. Travel a little in your mind and you'll hear the same language in distant quarters. In one port city, a Jewish physician recites a blessing and notes the sign at the ascendant before laying hands on a fevered child. In another, a Muslim astronomer-physician calculates the night's planetary hours for a hospital ward so that stronger purges aren't given at ragged times. A Christian friar with a skilled garden keeps a list of herbs paired with stars, not because he thinks plants obey him, but because the list stops waste and spreads harvest tasks over the month. Shared timing is a kind of peace. The famous Zodiac man, the illustrated figure from head to foot, moved out of hospitals and into homes in little woodcut almanacs. Housewives learned to skim them. Shepherds tucked them near their tool rolls. Sailors used the same calendars to nurse winter coughs on board. The pictures were simple: signs on the margins, moons sketched across days, small notes about when to bleed or when to abstain, when to bathe sore joints, when to spare them. They knit a village together because they gave neighbors the same words for care. Skepticism walked alongside faith in every century. City councils posted warnings about opportunists who preyed on grief. Physicians wrote reminders that despair is bad medicine and that no chart should keep a parent from summoning help. The best readers answered with humility, here are calmer windows, here are warning days. Here are gentle hours for a nervous child. Use them if you can, ignore them when you must. That tone, firm but human, kept the system useful even for those who didn't buy the cosmology. You can hear the psychology humming under the surface. A timed remedy gives patients the sense that their effort joins a larger rhythm. Sleep comes more easily when a nurse whispers, "This is the quiet hour. We chose it." Pain eases when a dressing is changed at a moment the whole household expects. Modern words for this effect are new, but the feeling is ancient. When a community keeps time together, bodies often respond with a little less fear. There's grace, too, in the old caution about not cutting where the moon is said to stir. Strip away the cosmology, and you still have a sensible teaching. Every area of the body has seasons of sensitivity after strain, after cold, after fever. Scheduling around tenderness is simply good care. The sky gave the lesson a language the whole town could hear. Let's end in that small room again, with the reed basket, the steaming water, the open ledger. A mother sits while a practitioner counts a pulse to the length of a prayer and glances at the hour. He does not promise the stars will fix everything. He promises steadiness, broths on the waning moon to ease swelling, walks in the soft light after the 10th hour, quiet hands on a shoulder when night anxiety wakes the patient. He marks 2 dates in the ledger, a likely rise in fever, a likely easing, and tells the family who will sit each watch. The wall figure watches with its patient smile, Aries at the brow, Pisces at the feet, a reminder that a body is a long road and care is the art of pacing. In the next room, a midwife heats cloths while checking a small chart for planetary hours, more to set calm than to set fate. In the alley, a barber rinses blades and ties a string around his wrist with notches for hours. Across town, a hospital steward snaps a chalk line on a board. This wards strong syrups at the 3rd hour, the convalescence broth at the 6th. No one demands that heaven bend. They ask, gently, that their work rhyme with what their neighbors expect. That rhyme is the quiet music behind Melathesia, a map that turns worry into watchfulness and sets healing to a beat a whole city can keep. The 2 zodiacs problem, tropical versus sidereal. Picture 2 maps laid on the same table. One is a calendar wheel painted with 4 bold hinges, spring and autumn equinox, summer and winter solstice. The other is a star chart, pricked with constellations along the sun's yearly road. Both maps are true, both are useful. Confusion begins when we forget that they are not the same map. Start with the seasonal wheel, the tropical zodiac. It fixes 0 Aries at the ABP, spring equinox, the moment when day and night balance and the sun crosses the celestial equator northward. From that anchor, it slices the year into 12 equal 30-degree segments, Aries through Pisces, as a repeating ring of seasons. Think of it as the city calendar, appointments tied to daylight, planting windows, school terms, trade fairs. Even if clouds hide the stars for a week, the equinox still arrives on time. This is why courts, festivals, and farmers trusted the tropical frame. It keeps civil life steady. Now place the star chart beside it, the sidereal zodiac. Instead of anchoring signs to seasons, it aligns them with the actual star fields along the ecliptic. Aries begins where a chosen fixed star reference says Aries begins, and the other 11 signs follow. Astronomers and navigators love this frame because it matches what your eyes and instruments see. Many traditions that still speak the language of Jyotisha measure this way, using a correction value, the Ayanasha, to account for how far the seasonal wheel has slid past the constellations. Why the slide? Because our spinning world doesn't keep its axis perfectly still. Over long centuries, that axis traces a slow circle, and the equinoctial point drifts westward along the ecliptic. This is the quiet engine behind the talk of ages: Aries, then Pisces, then Aquarius, as the spring point moves from one star region to the next. The pace is glacial on a human scale, but over 2,000 years the offset becomes obvious. Today, the seasonal zero Aries sits almost a whole sign away from the starry Aries that a siderealist marks on a chart. Here is the heart of the matter in a few calm lines. Tropical equals seasons. Sidereal equals stars. The first is a clock for earthly rhythm. The second is a map for celestial placement. Neither cancels the other. They simply answer different questions. You can hear how each map speaks by listening to the metaphors people favor. Tropical readers often talk in seasonal verbs: initiate, cultivate, harvest, release. Their Aries is the push of spring. Their Libra is the balance near autumn's hinge. Sidereal readers often speak in terms of stellar neighborhoods. A planet is in the company of this constellation or that card of fixed stars. The flavor comes from who lives nearby in the sky. When a siderealist says the sun is in Taurus, they mean the sun's ecliptic longitude currently projects into the bull's star field, adjusted by their chosen Ayanasha. When a tropicalist says the sun is in Taurus, they mean it's in the second 30-degree segment after the vernal point, regardless of which constellation occupies that slice at the moment. Both approaches inherit older jobs. The tropical wheel excels at shared scheduling law terms, fasts, restorations, sowing, and reaping. The sidereal frame excels at navigation, stellar magic recipes, and any practice that cares where a planet sits against the glittering backdrop. Imagine a ship's pilot setting a course by a bright star rising at a known bearing. That's sidereal thinking. Imagine a magistrate opening court when day and night match, and citizens expect fair measure. That's tropical thinking. Because this topic attracts heat online, let's gently cool two popular flare-ups. First, the panic headline about a 13th sign. Constellations are sky pictures of unequal size, and the sun's path, indeed, passes through a 13th figure. The 12 equal signs, however, are a separate geometric scheme, chosen for even month-like slices and for their usefulness in timing. Adding or removing a sign in the tropical system misses the point of that system. Second, the fear that one zodiac is fake. In practice, each is honest about its anchor. If your work needs seasons, use the seasonal wheel. If your work needs stars, use the star map. Many seasoned practitioners study both so their language stays precise. This twin map awareness also helps with the long conversation about the ages. When people speak of moving from a fish era toward a water-bearer era, they're watching the spring point drift across constellations on the sidereal map. On the seasonal map, the equinox is always the equinox first light of northern spring, no matter which constellation stands behind it. That's why a festival tied to the equinox doesn't migrate around the year. It stays put in March, even as the background stars change across centuries. The two frames even offer different flavors of self-reflection. A tropical reading might say, "Your year asks for a new start in the house. Where the spring point lands, plant something, set a schedule, clear a space." A sidereal reading might say, "Your year is colored by the fixed stars that host your sun and the slow march of planets across those regions. Expect themes echoed by those old sky stories." Neither tone is inherently softer or sharper. Each is simply tuned to a different ruler on the table. Bring this down to a scene you can feel. It's pre-dawn. A gardener ties twine around bean poles. On the kitchen wall, a simple wheel marks the day near the equinox. Time to start. That's the tropical calendar doing its job. Far away on a coast, a sailor watches a bright red eye in the bull lift over black water. He knows which channel opens safest when that star climbs to a certain height. That's the sidereal map at work. 2 lives, 2 clocks, 1 sky. For those who practice with care, the choice of zodiac is not a loyalty oath. It's a tool selection. Some questions are seasonal by nature: school terms, fiscal years, recovery cycles, civic rituals. Some are stellar by nature: orientations, talismanic images, fixed star themes for art and prayer, the way a natal planet converses with a named star. And sometimes the two shake hands, a ritual timed to an equinox, performed under a planet's union with a particular star, speaks both languages at once. There is also an ethical elegance in naming the frame you're using. When you tell a client, "I'm working tropically here, this is about your seasons," you set expectations. When you say, "I'm switching to sidereal here, this concerns the sky neighborhood," you keep the craft honest. No bait and switch, no noise, just clear rulers laid where all can see them. If you like simple tests, try these at home on a calm night. First, look up the date when the sun enters tropical Aries this year. That is your local spring hinge. Feel how light changes in your mornings and how markets and schools respond. Next, on a clear night in late spring, step outside and find the bull. Notice that the sun, bright during the day, is nowhere near that star picture at night. That's the offset in your own eyes. The seasonal hand and the stellar hand are pointing to different marks. You don't need a lecture to believe it. Your senses will do the teaching. And because this series is meant to ease you toward rest, let's end with a quiet image. Two old sailors leaning against a rail, arguing cheerfully about which chart to use. One taps the calendar: "We sail on the waxing light after the equinox." The other taps the stars: "We turn when the scorpion's heart clears the mast." Both are right for their roots. Both are reading the same book with different bookmarks. When you feel pulled into an online skirmish about which zodiac is real, remember those two friends. The wiser question is kinder: which ruler serves the job in front of you? In the next stretch, we'll keep that steady tone while we explore the moon's mansions, those small star stations that split the month into nightly steps, and how sailors, farmers, and makers use those steps the way temple keepers once counted hours, as a gentle metronome for meaningful work. Mansions of the moon. 28 nights, 28 meanings. Picture a shoreline before sunrise. Nets are coiled, a kettle hisses, and someone points to a faint cluster, lifting ahead of the Sunday second station, he says, almost to himself. A few miles inland, a farmer fastens a gate and repeats a different name for the same rising. Far away in a city, an apprentice checks a small table in the margin of an almanac and whispers the same count. None of them are looking at the 12 signs tonight. They're counting the month in smaller steps, the moon's mansions, those short stretches of sky the moon crosses night by night like stones in a shallow stream. Here's the feel of it. The sun writes the year in wide strokes. The moon writes the month in quiet syllables. Divide the moon's path into 27 or 28 stations. Traditions vary, and each clear night the moon visits the next one. Old calendars gave every stop a name, a character, and a few suggested uses. Sail when the moon stands in this mansion, sow beans when it stands in that, have your tools sharpened under another. The point wasn't superstition as much as coordination. If a whole coast believes the fourth night after first quarter brings steady winds, then boats leave together, help each other, and arrive together. Shared risk becomes bearable when timing is shared too. People along desert routes felt the same comfort. In places where the day bleaches landmarks, the night is a friend. Travelers learn the order of the stations the way singers learn a chorus, and a glance at the eastern edge of darkness told them how far they might go before midday heat. The names varied by language, but the rhythm was consistent. Count your nights, count your ground, and let the sky keep you from rushing. In towns, those little steps threaded themselves into workrooms. A perfumer's recipe might conclude with a plain line: distill on the third mansion after full moon for a brighter note. A woodcarver's schedule might put intricate work on a night marked for steady hands and leave sanding for a night when bodies feel heavy and slow. Whether the effect came from stars or from psychology, The craft improved because the schedule encouraged rest and focus in turn. That is one of the quiet strengths of the mansion habit. It distributes effort. Instead of expecting the same output every day, a shop lets the month breathe. Temple timekeepers once counted the hours of darkness with decans. Mansion keepers traced the moon's month with stations. Farmers, sailors, and healers all benefited. Gardeners planned quick-turn greens under one mansion, roots under another, pruning under a third, not because a heavenly switch forces sap, but because a community that agrees on pacing wastes less. You can picture neighbors in a narrow lane trading small notes by habit. Tonight's the good hour for setting cuttings, tomorrow for trimming. Even when clouds hid the moon, the count continued by memory. And the village moved together. Those little stations also became a kind of poetry. In some places, each mansion carried an image, an archer's hand, a flowing stream, a crown, a reed boat, and with the image came a tone. You can hear a metal worker telling his boy, "Not the crown knight, that's for polishing. Tonight is the boat, long strokes." A healer might choose a gentler purge or a warming broth depending on whether the mansion's mood was considered moist or dry, open or guarded. Put the labels aside and you still have a practical medicine. Some nights are good for big pushes, some for maintaining gains. Naming them helps people keep promises to their own bodies. The moon's pace is also comforting for families. Parents of restless children keep a private count and begin the bedtime routine earlier on the nights that tend to run hot. A woman who notices that her headaches prefer a certain slice of the month marks it and adjusts errands. A baker times sourdough starts to a short list of nights when the room's mood seems to favor patient rises. Whether the cause is light, habit, or expectancy is less important than the result. A household that has words for its own rhythm. On harbors and caravan routes, the mansions played well with instruments. An astrolabe could give a neat answer for the moon's position. A pilot's eye could supply the rest. How high a mansion star stands when the shoal is safest. How long from that rise to the turn past a headland. The mansions are not exact in the modern sense. They are exact enough to keep lives from tangling. A parapegma, a small peg calendar with holes, could mark off the nights. A pin moves each morning. Decisions follow the pin. Because crafts love recipes, the mansion habit slipped into image making too. A maker might be told, choose the hour when the moon is with this mansion and a certain planet stands strong. Engrave the image then. Set it with a stone that agrees. Modern ears may hear romance there. A workshop hears a schedule. Order the metal, book the engraver, tell the apprentice when to warm the pitch. The more a city learns to coordinate these tiny windows, the less it wastes skill. Notice how the mansions complement the signs rather than compete with them. The 12 signs give the month its larger scene through the sun. The mansions give each night its small task through the moon. One is the year's architecture, the other is the month's footpath. A farmer standing in a field at the vernal point feels the wheel of Aries turn. The same farmer 5 nights later, looking at a blade or a wagon mansion, chooses whether to plant long rows or mend tools. Different layers of the same sky speak different scales of time. This smaller rhythm turned out to be a gentle instrument for mood as well. People prone to worry learn to schedule heavy decisions away from hot nights, not because fate lurked there, but because sleep is thinner and patience shorter. A town that respects this won't set tax deadlines on nights everyone finds prickly. That's not mysticism, it's municipal kindness learned through repetition. Of course, not every night cooperates. Clouds hide the moon, storms tear up plans, a midwife is called on a night no one would choose. The good thing about a month cut into many steps is that you can recover without drama. If you miss the preferred night, the next one has its own use. The one after that asks for a different trade. There's always another station, another modest assignment, another chance to advance without strain. That's why mansion thinking made people more forgiving of themselves. You didn't fail the month. You simply took a different step on the same walk. Let's bring it to a scene you might know. You hang a paper calendar on the kitchen wall. Instead of big goals and red-circled ultimatums, you write small prompts across 4 weeks. Sharpen, seed, mend, share, brew, clean, study, rest, polish, deliver, file, plan. No one would argue that the moon wrote those instructions on your page. But if you nudge your list to match a steady night rhythm, hot nights for movement, cool nights for paperwork, pause nights for sleep, you'll feel what older towns felt. The month stops being a block to push and becomes a causeway of stepping stones. That is the quiet gift of the mansions. They teach patience without scolding. They take a long stretch of days and give each one a role modest enough to finish. They invite neighbors to align in miniature, not just at harvest festivals and market fairs, but on a Tuesday night when a few boats leave together, a few ovens light at the same hour, and a few patients take a brew after the second watch, because that's what the household agreed to call a healing time. If the yearly wheel is a grand square where the whole city gathers, the mansions are small lamps along a narrow lane. You don't need to see the end to keep moving. You only need the next pool of light, the next station on the night road, and the quiet knowledge that everyone else is counting with you. Fixed stars and star magic, Regulus, Spica, and Aries. Imagine night as a quiet harbor and the fixed stars as anchored ships. The planets are busy boats that wander. The bright anchors stay where they are, season after season, generation after generation. Sailors, physicians, metal workers, and readers of the sky all learned the same habit. When a moving light came to stand with a trusted anchor, the moment deserved attention. 3 anchors gained special reputations: Regulus, Spica, and Antares, and their nicknames tell you why people cared. One is the heart of the lion, another is the ear of grain, and the third is the heart of the scorpion. Courage, harvest, and caution written in light. Start with Regulus, the star a little off the lion's chest. It rises in late summer evenings like a sure pulse, and has long been linked with honors that must be carried well. A mason carving lions on a city gate would choose a week when a bright planet met that star and might whisper a short line as he set the last block. Let this entrance hold steady. A captain receiving a standard for a new watch might wear a small signet engraved on a night marked for the lion's heart, not as a charm against fate, but as a reminder of the kind of strength that matters quiet, watchful, earned daily. Then there is Spica, the bright spike of wheat in the hand of the maiden. It is a clean, bluish light that feels like a promise kept. Merchants used it as a check on storage and fair distribution. Bakers learned to watch its rising as a cue to think about grain stores, weights, and the coming weeks of work. Image makers loved Spica nights for projects meant to protect supplies, keep quality high, or bless a household with steadiness rather than spectacle. If Regulus belongs to banners and oaths, Spica belongs to bread, ledgers, and the honest pride of well-stocked shelves. Across the sky burns Antares, the ruddy heart of the scorpion, and its message has always been twofold: power and hazard in one breath. Ship pilots recognized its authority on autumn routes. Farmers treated its season with respect because storms and tempers both run high when the year leans toward its darker half. Craftsmen said Antares belongs to sharp instruments handled with clean intent. A blacksmith tempering blades might choose its hours to remind the shop that a good edge serves life when guided and cuts life when ignored. The star is not a threat. It is a teacher that refuses to flatter. These reputations crystallized into small lists, many artisans and healers kept at hand. A page might pair Regulus with certain stones and metals associated with strong governance and steady pulse, Spica with herbs that soothe and preserve, Antares with ingredients that cut fever or clear clots of anger. The lists were more than belief. They were filing systems for busy rooms. When everyone on a team knows which star goes with which shelf, Tools find their way back faster, and recipes are less likely to be spoiled by haste. Timing raised the craft. When a planet met a fixed star in the right part of the sky, strong, visible, high of heart, the hour gained a reputation for taking a set the way plaster does when the mixture is right. A goldsmith would aim to cast signets during moments that matched purpose, Regulus for insignia of office, Spica for weights and measures, Antares for surgical instruments or tools that must be respected. A physician choosing between two similar days might pick the Spica moment for a tonic intended to hold a patient's strength through a long winter. No thunderclaps followed, only a shared sense that work had been placed beneath a light that suited it. Because this series is about honest usefulness, it's important to keep feet on the ground. The fixed stars are not vending machines. No careful worker in any age believed a single recipe could bully the world. What they trusted was rhythm and memory. People behave better and focus longer when a task is linked to a story they all know. You see it in a workshop on a speaker night. The junior engraver straightens the scale weights twice without being told. The clerk reads numbers aloud a little more slowly. The master signs the inventory with a small, satisfied tap. Call it attention, expectation, or reverence. Whatever the word, it makes a difference you can count. The stars also helped people speak about moral tone without preaching. A city council announcing a period of amnesty preferred days near a balance in light and dark, or under stars known for mercy. A guild that needed to remind members to keep promises chose a Regulus window on purpose. A hospital that had seen too much rash cutting the previous year set a schedule with fewer hot-nerved nights around Antares and more cool windows around steadier stars. None of this chained choice. It framed it. The stars weren't bosses. They were signposts carrying long, human-tested stories. In private rooms, the language turned tender. A parent tying a pendant for a boy, leaving home might choose a night when the lion's heart rose in the east and tell a quiet story about courage that protects rather than provokes. A couple bringing their first harvest to town might rest a hand on the spica mark carved on the granary and feel relief rather than pride. A midwife returning late, tired but safe, could glance at the low red coal of Antares and think of all the sharp things handled well today. Blades, words, decisions, and be grateful. Even skeptics borrowed the schedule. City regulators learned that inspections announced in a speaker week met less resistance. Shops were already in a mood to check measures. Seasonal feasts staged near the lion's heart brought out banners and bright cloth with fewer scuffles at the ale stalls. Sailors choosing to repair gear under Antares rather than start a risky crossing had fewer regrets. The night sky didn't force any of that. The shared story simply helped citizens pull in the same direction. There was a medical side, too, and it kept its humility when it was at its best. Old handbooks might list favorable lights for treatments that aim to strengthen the heart, cool inflammations, or steady digestion. Practitioners chose windows when patients were calmer, families were prepared, and night watch could be shared without fraying. Put the star language aside and you still have excellent practice. Don't rush serious work. Gather attention. Pick a moment the household will honor. If a star's name helps everyone remember the plan, then the star has already done something practical. Notice how fixed stars and the two zodiacs cooperate rather than collide. The tropical wheel tells you which season you're in and what the town expects. Sow, judge, store, rest. The sidereal map tells you which bright anchors stand behind the scene. A lion's heart, an ear of grain, a scorpion's coal. When a planet walks across one of those anchors during a seasonal hinge, a bell rings in both systems. That's when a city might choose to swear oaths, weigh grain, mend sharp rules that have cut too many, or set guard rotations for an uneasy month. Timing and meaning shake hands. For workshop life, the recipe is simple and humane. Decide the purpose. Pick an hour that the team associates with that purpose. Prepare carefully. Do the work without rush. If you keep a notebook, your notes will build their own small canon. You'll find that your household bakes better bread under spiker hours because you all pay more attention then. You'll notice that your volunteer group writes clearer pledges under regulus hours because you talk about service instead of applause. You'll discover that teaching tool safety on an Antares evening lands better because everyone expects respect for edges. You don't need the sky to explain any of this. You need agreement, ritual, and steady repetition. The stars are how people remember. So think of Regulus, Spica, and Antares as lanterns hung along a familiar road. They don't drag you anywhere. They light certain corners so that decisions feel seen. They let a craftsman say to an apprentice, "This is a night for care," and have the whole room nod. They give a city a graceful excuse to pace itself, bravery when banners are raised, fairness when bread is weighed, caution when the year leans toward risk. In a noisy age, that's no small gift. In the next part, we'll tie these lights back to the older stories they carried. Why a ram's rescue marks beginnings, why a lion's victory teaches patience more than pride, and why the scales shaped law as much as trade, so the signs stop being slogans and become the seasonal ethics they once were. Myths the signs carried, and what we forgot. Let's walk the ring and listen to how a handful of signs once spoke to daily life, not just to personality. Think of each sign as a season with a story pinned to it, a short play the city knew by heart. When that play was staged in stone or song, people remembered what to do, how to treat each other, and where the risks were hiding. Start with the ram. The old story isn't about swagger, it's about rescue that costs something. A golden ram carries children away from danger. One is saved, one is lost, and the animal itself becomes an offering. People used to hear Aries as the first light after a long winter, the start that requires courage and care in equal measure. In fields, that meant bold sowing without waste. In households, it meant beginning projects with provisions in place, not just with bright feelings. The civic echo was simple. Leaders should protect first, celebrate later. When the year turned to this sign, towns responded with work that matched the tone: repair dikes, open canals, clean tools. Aries wasn't a trumpet blast, it was a signal to start with responsibility. Then the bull. In one set of tales, a god takes bull shape and carries a princess across the sea. In another, a proud animal is mastered with steady hands. On the ground, Taurus meant strength that holds, rather than rushes, oxen in harness, vines finding their trellis, coin kept in weighty jars instead of thrown into showy banquets. Bakers used this window to test flour and ovens. Carpenters set rafters. A quiet patience entered the square. The lesson came with a warning tag: strength without measure becomes theft or abduction. So the month carried rules: fair weights, fair wages, honest deals in livestock and land. A bull on a coin wasn't a boast. It was a promise to keep abundance from turning into taking. The twins sat in the late spring when roads were clearer and markets busy. Their story isn't just about likeness, it's about loyalty that crosses boundaries. One brother is mortal, the other not. They trade places to protect each other and keep the team whole. Cities translated that into practice. Apprentices paired with seniors, caravans set off in 2s and 3s, messengers traveled with partners. The month favored agreements and mutual aid societies. If you've ever watched a port where deckhands move as if sharing one mind, you've seen Gemini lived as technique signals, shared loads, quick relays rather than as chatter. Its civic ethic was collaboration that keeps both the fast and the slow from being stranded. The crab looks humble in the sky and in the tail. A small creature pulls at a hero's heel and is crushed for the effort. Later, it is set among the stars for loyalty. The season matches chores that are unglamorous, but essential homes sealed against heat, water carried, bread baked early in the day. Cancer lived in kitchens and wells, in shaded rooms where elders cooled while children learned to carry careful loads. Public life took the cue and scheduled relief cistern checks, shade in marketplaces, rules for animals at the trough. The sign taught that care that looks small still deserves to be named and rewarded. A city that forgets that suffers in summer. The strong stumble when the quiet tasks are neglected. And then the lion. The story that anchored this sign asked for patience more than roar. A beast with a hide no weapon can pierce is overcome by understanding how it moves, when it tires, where to grip. The season sits at the year's hottest stretch. Rash moves here waste energy and stores. So the sign taught leaders and households to pace themselves, to keep watch, to aim once rather than flail. Guilds examined tools, not egos. Mills were maintained. Salt was stocked. If banners were raised, they were raised to remind people to stand guard together, not to strut. When cities put lions on gates, the good ones meant this entrance is disciplined. In bad years, the symbol was misread as license. Heat and pride made an easy pact, and granaries paid for it. After heat comes the maiden with an ear of grain. No mystery here, this is the time to inspect, sort, put by, label, and keep clean. The myth texts speak of order and service. The streets translated that into quiet mastery. Scribes checked ledgers, tailors stitched seams meant to last, brewers brewed for storage more than for feasts. The best advice under Virgo wasn't romantic, it was a checklist. That's why people trusted it. When the ear of grain appears, the wise town honors the steady worker, the one who keeps the thread from snarling and the jars from spoiling. Story, season, and ethics fit like nested boxes. Now the scales. You can hear the square hush when the equinox arrives because light and dark balance and the city follows suit. Weigh grain, check measures, renew contracts. The image may have come with an old goddess of justice. The marble in a portal may show tidy pans. The point is the same. This is when you hold up weights to light, that tone-shaped law. Amnesties were often announced now. Disputes sat in front of magistrates with extra clerks to see that records stayed clean. Shopkeepers expected surprise inspections and greeted them without fear because the week belonged to fairness. Libra's myth spoke of measure. The calendar made it policy. As the nights lengthened, the scorpion rose. In legends, a hunter ignores warnings and is brought low. In the sky, a red heart burns inside a hooked tail. The season's task is caution. Harvest is joy and hazard in one breath. Wagons overloaded, ladders on slick ground, tempers short. The sign reminded people to handle sharp things with respect. Sickles, knives, pride, words. Physicians used these weeks for calm procedures and counseled patients in the rest. If you've ever worked a long day near the end of a project and felt how one careless hour can undo 10 careful ones, you've heard Scorpio's voice. Near the threshold of winter, the archer stands. The old image of a poised bow is not aggression, it's readiness tuned by practice. This is when journeys must be planned with care. Roads are dangerous, nights long, weather fickle. The sign became shorthand for training. Archers, yes, but also scribes drilling letters, sailors practicing without cargo, students repeating scales. The month rewarded skill built in quiet hours. Households packed carefully. Merchants staged loads. Towns reminded travelers of known dangers on the road. When the archer was high, schools and guard posts felt busy for a reason. Then the sea goat, a creature that mixes body plans as winter says, adapt. The stories teach survival that bends rather than breaks. The season backed that up with ice, wind, and shortages. Families rotated stores and patched roofs. City crews inspected bridges. Debts were tallied and plans made for the lean weeks ahead. In hard years, the sign's ethic duty with flexibility kept neighbors from shaming each other for taking odd jobs or trading across old lines. Do what works and stay honorable, people said, and the goat with a tail on mosaics nodded. The water-bearer pours, not as a party trick, but as a service. After the hardest cold, some chores can feel hopeless. The sign reminded towns to share resources, grain from the civic store, firewood from a guild chest, care for travelers, and to repair what winter punished. Aqueducts, wells, pipes, goodwill. The genius of Aquarius in civic life wasn't theory, it was maintenance. Councils paid attention to public works. Engineers got their week of thanks. Small inventions got tested. A city that celebrated the water carrier understood that progress is a chain of ordinary hands. And finally, the fishes, tied together, moving through late winter towards spring. The old story is a flight and a bond, two lives connected to survive rough water. Households reading that sign leaned into cooperation. Communal meals, shared watch, a final push to mend nets and clear fields for the new turn of the year. This was a time for quiet charities that didn't need trumpets. The bond in the sky taught that no one crosses the last cold alone. In the street that looked like neighbors trading hours, warm rooms opened for the frail, and a fast from gossip that could split a tired town. If you look at the ring this way, the signs stop arguing about character and start teaching a calendar of habits. Aries protects starts, Taurus holds steady, Gemini pairs workers, Cancer honors quiet care. Leo enforces pacing, Virgo tidies what will carry us, Libra tests, measures, Scorpio warns against reckless edges, Sagittarius practices before the trip, Capricorn adjusts to survive with honor. Aquarius maintains the shared systems, Pisces knots people together so the year can turn with everyone still on board. That's the part we forgot when we turned the signs into private mirrors. Their older job was public. They taught a square when to set prices, a workshop when to sharpen and when to rest, a court when to expect more mercy than usual, a port when to insist on safety. Their myths weren't slogans, they were short plays staged every year to keep a city decent. When those plays return to streets and ledgers, the sky feels useful again. And that usefulness, oddly enough, is what lets the personal reflections breathe. When a household hangs its chores on the ring, individuals find more room to be themselves inside a rhythm that holds. Keep your horoscope, restore the library. Here's the straight invite. Keep the part of astrology that speaks to your inner weather if it helps you, but return the sky to shared work. We've walked tablets, temples, workshops, courts, and kitchens. We've watched the Zodiac set wages and watches, moderate courts, pace healing, and steady markets. Somewhere along the way, the signs were squeezed into personality badges and left to argue on social feeds. The cost wasn't just confusion about dates. We lost a public language for timing, care, fairness, and caution. It's time to put that language back where it belongs, next to bread, bridges, hospitals, and schools, without pretending the heavens dictate our choices. Start with a small, stubborn stance. The zodiac is most useful when it is civic first and private second. When a town knows its hinges, 2 equinoxes, 2 solstices, and hangs visible rituals on them, people meet each other in rhythm instead of colliding at random. Picture an equinox week that the city openly brands as measure and mercy. Pop-up inspection kiosks for weights and contracts, court dockets that prioritize reconciliation, food drives that audit distribution as carefully as any ledger. That isn't mysticism, it's calendar literacy with ethics attached. The ring on a floor is already preaching it. We only need to listen. Pair that with a second stance that will annoy absolutists on both sides. Learn to be bilingual. Seasonal, tropical, and stellar sidereal frames do different jobs. Seasonal time keeps markets, schools, and laws honest. Stellar placement keeps navigation sharp, rituals grounded, and craft attentive. A grown culture doesn't pick one to mock the other. It states which ruler it's using and why. Imagine a public-facing weather and time bulletin that says, in plain language, we're at the autumn hinge, expect balance audits, nights grow longer. Out at sea, The Scorpion's heart is high after dusk. Pilots choose safer channels. 2 rulers, 1 city, 0 drama. Now the part that pricks. If a media page prints a sun sign blurb, it should pay a tax that funds sky literacy in schools. Not as a punishment, but as balance. For every cheerful line about romance for Leo, a 5th grader should get to step under a ceiling that teaches precession with light, watch a beam hit a mark on an equinox, and learn why calendars sometimes add a month, so barley and moonlight stay friends. Make that trade and the whole debate cools. People can enjoy personal symbolism without losing contact with the world that symbols grew from. You've seen how the older stories carry public habits. Aries isn't a swagger. It's the duty to start with protection. Libra isn't an aesthetic. It's a promise to weigh fairly. Scorpio isn't doom. It's the caution that saves harvests and reputations. If you want a bracing policy proposal, try this. Tie certain municipal actions to sign weeks on purpose. Open budget comment periods when the scales are in season, and announce it with an actual pair of street-side scales people can test with their own hands. Schedule citywide tool inspection days in the lion's heat, framed as pride with discipline. Sharpen, oil, log cereals, teach safe handling. Set quiet chores campaigns in the maiden's weeks. Public cleanups, archive days, pantry checks, gratitude for the unseen work. The symbolism isn't decoration, it's a memory trick that makes the effort stick. Medicine deserves the same restoration practical, not credulous. No one is asking a trauma ward to wait on the moon. But clinics can still borrow the old wisdom that timing soothes. Publish. Gentler windows for routine procedures, not as decree, but as hospitality. These evenings tend to be calmer. Book if it helps your nerves. Train staff to use steady phrases that feel like night watch. We'll change this at the 2nd hour. We'll check fever at dawn. Here is the quiet hour. The wall doesn't need a Zodiac man to validate that approach. Patients will know you've put rhythm back into care. Workshops can revive the fixed star habit in a grounded key, call it attention engineering. Under a Regulus hour, teams sign service pledges and review duty of care. Under a Speaker hour, inventory and quality checks. Under an Antares hour, tool safety drills with an emphasis on edges and words. The sky's names are just labels for focus blocks. The point is shared attention at predictable times, so skill gets the best of us, not the hurried rest of us. Schools can make the controversy useful. Let students run a friendly 2 zodiacs lab. Chart the equinox against the constellations for a century's span. Let them see the offset with their own eyes. Then let them build a cardboard parapegma, a little pegboard calendar, and run a month of mansion nights, where homework types rotate, reading nights, craft nights, math nights, rest nights. Watch grades rise because expectations stopped being vague. The lesson sticks because hands moved, not because a slide declared a fact. Faith houses already know how to do this wisely. They time rituals to hinges, temper dogma with hospitality, keep their own calendars while respecting civil ones. Invite them into city timing where appropriate, not to bless every event with incense, but to help neighbors name seasons without scolding. A community that can say this is our balance week in a dozen languages is already stronger than one that shouts about whose belief is right. And yes, keep the personal readings if they help you see yourself more kindly. Just refuse the lazy version that forgets the 2 maps or sells dread. Ask better questions. What seasonal hinge do I keep ignoring? Which star stories give me courage to be patient rather than loud? Where does my household need a night rhythm instead of a to-do pile? Personal symbolism that feeds public steadiness is worth keeping. The rest is noise. Here is the spark that will feel controversial in a world hooked on hot takes. The most radical use of the zodiac now is to make it boring again in the best sense. Let it do ordinary jobs so well that tempers cool. Let it schedule audits, tune clinics, pace workshops, set festival weeks, and teach children how light moves. Let the ring on a floor stand for promises kept, fair weights, safe tools, watched hours, shared stores, steady bridges. If that sounds small, remember that cities survive by small things repeated. Clean water, patient ledgers, maintenance, quiet hands. Picture a near-future evening. A censer on a public square throws a line of light across a stone scale. Kids laugh and stand on the pans. A clerk starts an honest measures stamp for market stalls. A clinic down the street puts a sign, calm window walk-ins welcome tonight. A makerspace posts, sharp talk and sharp tools respect hour. None of this requires belief in fate. All of it requires neighbors who like meeting at the same time for the same good reasons. That, more than any blurb about a lucky color, is what the Zodiac once did best. We can keep the private poetry. We can keep the fun. But the invitation is larger. Reclaim the sky as a shared teacher. 2 maps on one table, seasons for law and bread, stars for pilots, crafts, and stories. You choose, clearly, which ruler in which moment. You say it out loud. And in that clarity, the old ring becomes what it always wanted to be. Not a mirror that flatters, but a clock that helps us treat each other well.